Eiji Aonuma is wrong. Okay, first, I've got a couple of things I want to say before I get into the video. First of which, this is going to be completely unscripted. Most of my videos are scripted. This one is going to come from the heart because Zelda is one of my top games ever. Like, it is in my top 3 game franchises. And I have to say, here's another one. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I do not like the recent 2 Zelda games, be it Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I think they are okay games, okay? I'm gonna say that. They are okay as games, but they are not Zelda games in my opinion. They are bad Zelda games, if you understand what I'm saying. They are good games, they are not good Zelda games. Now, why do I say that? First, I think we need to go over what makes a Zelda game. If you look at every single Zelda game, I can give you 4 distinct categories that define a Zelda game. Now, why I'm going to go over these 4 categories, which I'll get to in a second, is because not any of them is the world design. Now, Eiji Aonuma recently, a bunch of articles have been coming out because he did an interview or just simply asked or answered a question rather during the Game Awards where he was asked if he would make a traditional Zelda game after the last 2 were open world, and he said, no, why would anyone want to go back to traditional Zelda games? Linear games are of the past, it's now to the future. Now, he's not completely wrong, and the open world aspect of the game is not what's wrong with these last 2 entries, okay? It's not the open world, and it's not the sandbox. I love open world games. I love sandbox games. My entire channel is dedicated to open world survival sandbox games, okay? 2 of those are in the last 2 Zelda entries. The reason now is why I'm saying he's wrong is because he's saying that it's the open world versus the linear, which is why people are upset or not upset or whatever. No. That's completely wrong. Here's why. Now, the 4 categories that we're going to define a Zelda game. If I tell you, oh yeah, Zelda game. If I ask you, what's your favorite Zelda game? Or if you talk to anybody, anywhere, at a convention, online, they will tell you any one of these 4 key items, or categories rather, that will define a Zelda game. The first one being its story and its delivery method. Those are kind of like a combo thing, both the story and the delivery. If anyone has watched my channel, you know I rate those 2 different things as separate, but we're going to combine them into one for this video. So, story and its delivery is 1. Now, the story of Zelda is completely just none of the games, with the exception of a couple of them, you know, they all fit together. There's this whole timeline theory, and it's kind of bullshit in my opinion. I just like the Zelda games being each individual its own thing, and then having a part 2 once in a while for a certain game. That's completely fine. I don't mind Majora's Mask being a part 2 to Ocarina of Time. I don't mind there being, you know, other games that are part 2 to whatever. That's whatever, right? That's not the issue. Now, the second one is going to be the dungeons. Everyone knows Zelda is all about its dungeons. Then you have its items. The items. Man, do you remember the claw shot? Do you remember the boomerang, the fire rod, the iron boots? Yes, those are all unique items. If I go to a convention right now, I can go to a retailer or I can go to one of the artist alleys. They will have keychains, they will have necklaces, they will have all different things on Zelda items. The heart container. Everybody knows these items. They're iconic. And then the last thing, the 4th category, is the gimmick. Every Zelda game has at least 1 to 2 gimmicks. Now, if there are 2 gimmicks, they're usually intertwined. For an example, Zelda Wind Waker, it has 2 gimmicks. One being the wide ocean that you can sail, and the second one being the Wind Waker item itself. but they can combine into one thing, because the Wind Waker can directionally change the wind for you to sail, as well as be your fast travel method while you're on the open ocean. So there's that. And then Twilight Princess is the wolf gimmick, obviously. Skyward Sword, you have two gimmicks, I would say. You have the flying with the bird, and you have the directional motion with the Wii. Zelda Ocarina of Time, you have past and present. Or is it present in future? Or it doesn't matter. You go between two timelines. Not Ocarina of Time. We already said Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask is you're always on a timeline. Even going back into the original Zelda games, like Zelda 2 is side-scroll, Zelda 3, which is A Link to the Past, you have the Dark World, that's its gimmick. Every Zelda game has a gimmick. Now then, let's get into Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Every single category, with the exception of gimmick, I would say, because they all technically have gimmicks, but the first three categories, items, dungeons, and story delivery, none of these two games have what the other Zelda games have in terms of these three categories. Now let me explain. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, with the exception of dungeons for Tears of the Kingdom, because I would say that one is a little bit better, but not completely. Let's start first with the dungeons. So, dungeons. Every Zelda game has the forest dungeon, the fire dungeon, the ice dungeon, the wind, the shadow, the light, and then there's some unique ones sprinkled in there, but all of them are unique. All of them are mostly memorable, because, there's like one or two that are like, whatever, but they're all mostly memorable. If I went on a top 25 Zelda dungeon list, or a tier list, if you told me the name of a dungeon, or at least what dungeon from what game, because, there's like 5 Shadow Temples, if you told me the Shadow Temple from A Link to the Past versus Ocarina of Time, I know exactly what all of them look like, what they feel like, and how they play, and most of their puzzles, right? You can imagine all of their dungeons, and their themes, the stories, why you're there. They are very unique. They are all unique, rather. In Breath of the Wild, there are four main dungeons, and all 4 of them are pretty much aesthetically the same. They are inside of robots. They maybe have one gimmick because of their element that they revolve around, the fire for the Gorons, the earth, the water, the wind. So, minus their one little gimmick puzzle, it's like 5 rooms that you complete in like maybe 10 minutes or less, 5 minutes at most. You finish them, and then every single one of those 4 dungeons has the exact same, puppet Ganon that has a gimmick based around the element that it revolves around, like the lightning and the whatever. It doesn't matter. So, it's always Puppet Ganon, or Shadow Ganon, or whatever it's called. I forgot. I think it's Puppet Ganon, right? So, all 4 bosses are the same, and all of the dungeons are aesthetically the same, with the exception of its one element gimmick. But it's not even a fire dungeon. It's just a robot that has some fire. It's not, or did it have fire? I don't really remember the desert one. I think it was sand, right? Well, I remember the elephant one with the water, and you had to raise the water levels and stuff like that, and the air one you had to turn on its side. So, yeah, it's like there's one gimmick, but it's like whatever. Now, if I go back to the other dungeons, I've already explained this, but I'm going to say it one more time in comparison. The dungeons of older games, the fire dungeon in Zelda Twilight Princess, for an example, I just kind of spat that out there, but even then, just spitting it out there, I remember exactly what it is. It's a giant, like, mine with, it's a mining facility in a volcano, and there's lava, but you see all of the, crucibles everywhere, and the magnetized, like, rails that you have to walk on, because that's where it introduced the iron boots. And not only that, you use the bow, you use, like, all of your arsenal that you have obtained up until that point. And, that's part of it. That's really what it is. It's just the theme of it. The newer Zelda dungeons are not that. Well, for Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom, they did better. They finally, after Breath of the Wild that is, introduced thematic dungeons with unique bosses. Now, I really don't remember any of the bosses. They were not really memorable in my opinion. You have the one that you skydive and whatever, it's fine. I remember the final boss more than anything, which is Ganon. But anyway, interjecting a second, this is me from the future. I completely forgot to talk about the final bosses. The final bosses are an absolute letdown. Now, the Breath of the Wild one is, you know, the Puppet Ganon or whatever that first phase is, where that one's actually, you know, mildly difficult. It took me a little while to take him down, right? Just throw a bunch of weapons at him and kaput, that's it. You know, mildly difficult, whatever. Now, the part 2, where he's actually like Ganon, and he's the giant pig in the middle of the field, and you're on the horse. Now, in terms of like the scope and the epicness, it feels very epic, right? The giant boar, and he's doing all these laser beams. The reality is, he absolutely fucking does nothing. You can stand still, and Ganon does nothing. There are videos of people just leaving the battlefield to the other side of the world, in the game world that is, and Ganon just chills in Hyrule Field and does nothing. He doesn't target you, he doesn't try to hit you, he doesn't try to hit anything. He's just there. So you have to literally try to lose that fight. Now, in Tears of the Kingdom, again, it's a multi-phase fight, and some of them are mildly difficult. It was actually like, okay, cool. But then the final one, right? Now, I'm not saying every Zelda game is, you know, the best when it comes to the final fight. I would say Twilight Princess, the first couple of fights are okay, but the final phase where you're face-to-face against Ganondorf, that's pretty shitty, right? The final phase of Tears of the Kingdom, where it's the dragon versus dragon and you're jumping between them to try to harm him, that was on an epic scope, just, you know, off the charts, right? Epic dragon versus dragon fight. But in reality, it's really just a copy-paste of one of the other bosses, and you're just kind of skydiving and trying to hit, and, oh, I missed, okay, Zelda caught me, let's try again, and you're really just cycling through until you hit all of them, and it's not really challenging. It's, again, on an epic scope, it's cool, but we need something challenging to be that final fight. You need to earn your victory. The Ganondorf, or the Ganon fight in Ocarina of Time, when you're first playing that for the first time, you do not know how to fight him, therefore it was hard. Once you figure out how to fight him, it's mildly difficult, but really it's kind of easy if you know how to cheese it. But, you know, as a kid, it's kind of hard. This game, you go in blind, you don't know what to do, and you do it no problem. There's nothing more to do. Now, I'm not asking for super mega Dark Souls hard, right? I'm asking for mildly difficult, challenge me the first time I'm fighting him. You know, once you know how to fight him, that's another thing. But challenge me. I want to lose. Let me lose a couple of times. Make the stakes higher. Therefore, when I finally beat that final fight, I finally kick Ganondorf or Ganon or whatever phase he's in his face, then I feel earned. And then you have that rush at the very end to catch Zelda as she's falling. That's when your heart is racing, and boom, you finally did it. But it just does not work. The chasing the Zelda thing is like, okay, oh no, gotta catch her. But up until that point, nothing. The Breath of the Wild is an absolute nothing, because again, you just stand there, and he does nothing. Going back to, now, the items themselves. Oh wait, real quick, before I go back to items, let's go back real quick to shrines. Now, shrines on paper, I would say shrines on paper, now this is for both games, they sound fine, you know, little mini dungeons sprinkled throughout the world, and they have unique puzzles that reward you with something when you win. Fair enough, you know, it's like it's a Skyrim inside of Zelda. The issue is, again, they are all thematically the same, and it just gets absolutely fucking boring. And some of the little mini shrines are copy paste, like the combat ones. They are copy paste, and it just gets to the point that why is there like 120 of them? Just why? They all are thematically the same. They just all feel the same, regardless of the puzzles within. Some of them are completely unique, and that's fine. But most of them just feel like they were copy-pasted to fill out the world, have 120, and meet that quota. You know, I could have done with far less mini shrines or mini dungeons and had them all be completely unique. Like, I can remember almost every mini dungeon or cave inside of Skyrim. I cannot tell you any of them in Breath of the Wild, except for maybe like the 2 that were like paralleled on the side of the mountain or whatever. I just don't remember any of them. And, you know, screw off with the Korok seeds. We're not even going to talk about the Korok seeds. But now let's go into the items. So the items themselves. Every single Zelda game has themed items. Not themed items, but they're iconic items. The claw shot, the hook shot, the fire rod, the iron boots, the bow. Like, every single item is, well, most items are memorable. Even the non-memorable ones, such as like the digging claws and like Skyward Sword or something, the ball and chain or the spinner, which are really useless outside of their dungeons and Twilight Princess, but even then, they are unique items that you earn by playing the game, and then you can unlock new stuff out in the world by using those items. Mostly, I wish the spinner was a little bit more useful, but whatever. Now, if you look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the entire system is based on durability. Now, the reasoning is because they wanted you to cycle through the items and be almost like a survival game. You know, your item breaks, you have to pick up the weapon of your enemy to use that firsthand. Now, Wind Waker played a little bit with this, right? You could pick up the weapons that enemies drop and use it against them. However, you didn't really keep them, right? It's somewhat the same, only the difference is, in Wind Waker, even though I can pick up a giant polearm or a giant sword and use it against the enemy, and I don't really get to keep them, I still had the iconic items that there was only one of in the world, and once you acquired it, you kept it, and, you know, it's just like any other Zelda game with their special items. In Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you do not have that at all. There are no iconic items because every single item that you get has a durability, so it breaks. You learn to not stay attached to it because you discard it for another item 2 seconds later after all of your 20 swords or rocks or whatever the hell you have just break. So there's no iconic items, there's nothing you grow attached to, except maybe your Master Sword, but, you know, Master Sword's in every single game, so it's a given that it has to be there, but even then, you can only really use it for a limited amount of time before it needs to recharge. Like, what the hell is that? Like, I don't know, I just really do not like the durability system. Like, again, they should have done what Wind Waker did. It gave you those iconic items, the fire rod, the whatever, you know, I'm just gonna repeat what I said again, but it gives you the iconic items, and then on the side, you could get, like, a sword, a polearm, a bow, a something that a enemy drops that you can use as a temporary item, but then you still had your tool arsenal, your tools, your arsenal, that you would keep with you throughout the entire game. And you don't have to make it a linear game. Here's where he's saying that it's a linear game. No, you don't have to make it linear. You don't. Have the items hidden in the world, and you have to do something, whether it be a puzzle, part of the story of that region of the world, or by acquiring another item first, or even just using the sandbox elements that the Tears of the Kingdom introduce, so you can unlock and acquire that item. Then you feel like you earned it. You've, you know, earned this special item that can now do even more unique things in the world. You can play with them, you know, experiment with them, but you keep it, and it's yours, and it's that special item, and you get, like, you know, 5 or 6 of them. You don't really need much, but 5 or 6 is, like, the ideal number of items. You get your Hylian shield that you keep. You get your Master Sword that you can use non-stop. Well, eventually, when you do get the Master Sword, because that takes a while in Tears of the Kingdom. Even in Breath of the Wild, but Breath of the Wild, there's a way to cheese it. Anyway, so there's that. Now, the story delivery. Dear God, the story delivery. I absolutely hate the story delivery in both of the new Zelda games. Now, here's why. Any game, not just Zelda games, any game, it is imperative that you play a part of the story. Otherwise, what's the point? I played a game on my channel that I reviewed called Raft. If anyone remembers that game, Raft is a game where the story You're not a part of the story. The story is happening ahead of you. You are following the trail of the main characters and the story as it plays out, and you're just kind of following the trail, and then at the very end, you finally face the boss, or the villain that you had been reading up or listening to radio calls about the entire time. Zelda, both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, pretty much are the exact same way. Now, there's two different story deliveries within the game. There's the story that Link embarks on, and then there's the flashbacks. The flashbacks are the story. They are the integral part and the best part. The stories are good. I'm not saying they're bad at all. They're very good. But the issue is, we are not a part of them. They are flashbacks. They happened in the past. Or in Tears of the Kingdom, it happens at that moment, but it takes place in the past. But timey-wimey shit, it doesn't matter. So, it doesn't matter. You are not a part of it. What you are a part of, Link's integral story, is literally nothing more than 4 or 5 stories of the different sections of the world that are all copy-paste. They are all exactly the same. Now, Tears of the Kingdom has its own story, and Breath of the Wild have their own story, but in those individual games, each section, like think of Breath of the Wild, you have 4 main sections, right? For the 4 temples, the 4 guardians, or whatever the hell, or with, oh my god, I can't remember what they're called, oh my god, they're like in every game, I can't remember what they're called, it doesn't matter, the 4 characters, right? You have the Goron, the Zora, the Rido. When you go and embark on those areas, every single story of each of those 4 areas are exactly the same. You first have to find a way how to get into the area. Once you get into the area, you have to find the town or find out how you get into the town. Once you get into the town, now there's something wrong and the person that you were looking for is in trouble. So you have to help them or go do something to help them. Now, once you finish that, they're like, yeah, we'll help you. Now we have to, do the outside boss battle where you circle around the robot. And then once you do that, you go into the dungeon, and then they're talked to by the spirits or oh my god, sages! That's the word I'm looking for, the sages. Then they're talked to by the sages, and then they're given the powers, and like, okay, now here's my special power, go. It's literally all copy-paste. Tears of the Kingdom, now it does it a little bit different, but in terms of all of the sections of the game where you meet all of your characters, again, it is copy-paste exactly the same, down to the fucking, like, the animation at the end when you beat the level and they're getting their power. It is copy-paste. They just switch out the characters, but it's the exact same... it's the exact same cutscene as all of the other ones. They just switch out the characters and switch out No, the dialogue is actually mostly the same on most of them. It's not even that. That's even copy-paste. Do you see what I'm talking about? It's all copy-paste, 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 copy-paste. Meanwhile, the actual good story is flashbacks. What the hell? So no, I think the story delivery on both of these games are absolute trash garbage. The story itself is very good, but we're not a part of it. In other Zelda games, in other games in general, you are a part of the story, and that's the part about a video game. Video games are taking off as an industry above the movie industry because players are a part of the story. You are a part of the story, or you can play as another character that's not you, but you're still, you're still involved in the story, whether it's, linear, it's going to happen no matter what you do, or it's a choice game like The Witcher where you have like 12 different endings. So that's really the biggest thing about the story. The dungeons, the items, to hell with the gimmick, because the gimmick, that's going to be a part of every Zelda game. And the gimmick of these two games, well, the gimmick of Breath of the Wild is that it's an open world, okay? That's its gimmick, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it being an open world, and there's nothing wrong with that as the gimmick. Tears of the Kingdom is, again, open world, that's its gimmick, and then its second gimmick is the arm. Well, I guess in Breath of the Wild, you could say the second gimmick is the little, like, iPad you get. It's like the little iPad that you get, while the arm is the second gimmick of Tears of the Kingdom. And the arm allows you to do different things, just as the iPad did in the other one, the Sheikah Stone or whatever it's called. And from there, you can develop the sandbox elements and just go and have fun. Nothing wrong with that. I do not have an issue with that at all. No one does. But it's the first three, the items, the dungeons, the story. That's where people have an issue. Those three categories, nothing about these two new games are anything like a traditional Zelda game. There's no iconic items. There are no thematic dungeons. You know, Tears of the Kingdom did okay, but the shrines are still all copy-paste. And the story delivery is absolute garbage. You are not a part of the story. You don't see Link in the cutscenes like you do in Twilight Princess, where he's going out there saving the kids. In Ocarina of Time, where you see him and Zelda running through the collapsing castle, and then they see Ganon emerge from the rubble. It's not the same. And that's why people want a traditional Zelda game. You can keep the open world, you can keep the sandbox elements, but add a story where you are a part of it, where Link is a part of it, not following the flashbacks. Add more thematic dungeons. Shrines, give them variety. You know, on paper, they're fine, but give them variety in terms of their looks. We don't want the exact same ancient Sheikah, whatever look is ancient stone look. Give them themes. Make it like a cave. Make it an actual like dungeon. Make it I don't know, just a temple, like a small little ruin, a temple. There's so much you can do with a little underwater cave or something. So much you can do. Dungeons, same thing. Items. You can come up with so many unique items, or just bring back old items. You know, the claw shot, the fire rod, all again. I'm gonna say them all again. But, you know, add in unique items that we can collect, and then have the ones that you can just grab on the side and use as whatever. You know, that's how you that's how you're going to progress Zelda. That's how you're going to make Zelda great again. Yes, I'm using that term, make Zelda great again. Okay, that's it for me today, but look, this is completely unscripted, but Zelda, again, I'm going to say this, is my top 3, like, franchises of any game. I love Zelda. I've played almost every single one, with the exception of, you know, like Spirit Tracks or something. In the newer one that's like the one where you make clothes, or I don't know. I don't even remember what it's called. It doesn't matter. It's not a real Zelda game to me. but like, I love Zelda, and, you know, up until these two games, I thought Skyward Sword was the weakest one. Skyward Sword had a lot of things good about it. It was just the linearity of that game that kind of made it feel bad, and the fact that you had to fight the Unchained like 3 times. But in that, where Skyward Sword was so heavily linear compared to the last couple of games in the franchise, they went the complete opposite direction and tried to give you so much freedom that it just does no longer feel like a Zelda game. There is a good balance. There is, and I've explained it. You know, Twilight Princess, I think, was, up until Breath of the Wild, the closest we got to an open-world, traditional Zelda game. It had the story you were a part of. It had the items that you can unlock. It had a wide-open field, which, wide open in terms of what we could accomplish at that time in terms of, you know, technology. But take all of that. Take Twilight Princess, and just, you know, instead of putting a bunch of gorges everywhere so the field is limited, make it open world. Make it so you can actually go and run into the field. Have that army of Bokobins or Moblins or whatever it was, like we saw in the actual like E3 trailer for it back in 2003 or 4 or whatever it was. You know, do that. That's all we ask for as Zelda fans, Eiji Aonuma. Seriously. Anyway, this video has been going on too long. It's a rant, and, you know, I'm sorry if some people feel a little bit upset, if they are upset at me, you know, dissing the last 2 games, because there are fanboys out there, but you know, I'm a fanboy too of the Zelda franchise, and I just don't feel that these last 2 games are Zelda games. But anyway, okay, enough ranting. See, this is why I write scripts, so I don't go off on rants. Anyway, this is going to be the end of my video. For real this time, Florida Gatorman out.